The Age of Exploration and New Monarchies, Part 1. Portuguese and Spanish Exploration. Why explore? Hope, new discoveries. Three main reasons. For the three G's: gold, God, and glory. Gold for money and riches, of course. Glory for pride. And God to expand the Christian faith. New technologies that emerged during this time of exploration were the axial rudder, so that you could turn the ship from the top of the deck. Another new technology, the lateen sail, triangular in shape, so that you could go whichever direction you wanted to, regardless of the way that the winds were blowing. The astrolabe, which measured time and position of the sun, and also stars in the sky that helped with navigation. The compass, discovered initially by the Chinese, or created initially by the Chinese, it helped to guide the explorers with direction. So let's start with the Portuguese exploration. It was the Portuguese who made the first dramatic breakthroughs in exploration and colonization. Perched on the southwestern tip of Europe, Portugal was an agriculturally poor and sparsely populated country. The Portuguese had long been sea explorers, especially in the Atlantic, where they had established bases in the Madeira and Azores Islands. Their small ships were ideal for ocean travel, and their navigators were among the best in the world. Yet they were unable to participate in the lucrative Italian trade in spices until the expanding power of the Ottoman Empire threatened the traditional eastern routes. Under the energetic leadership of Prince Henry the Navigator, the Portuguese pushed steadily southward. Prince Henry studied navigational techniques, accumulated detailed accounts of voyages, and encouraged the creation of accurate maps of the African coastline. What was learned on one trip was applied to the next, as the Portuguese inched their way down the western African coastline. Soon the Portuguese were a power in which African slavery was common. By the 1480s, Portuguese outposts had reached almost to the equator, and in 1487 Bartholomew Diaz rounded the tip of Africa and might have reached India if his crew had not mutinied and forced him home. Regardless, this opened the eastern African shore to Portuguese traders. The aim of these enterprises was access to Asia rather than Africa, finally accomplished by Vasco da Gama in 1497 and 1498, as he rounded the Cape of Good Hope and crossed into the Indian Ocean. When he returned to Lisbon in 1499 with the most valuable spices of the East, Portuguese ambitions were finally realized. Larger expeditions followed with cannons, one of which, blown off course, touched the South American coast of Brazil. Portuguese cannon attacks terrified the native populations, and Portuguese dominance was soon established in that country. Spain. While most of Portugal's resources were devoted to the Asian trade, those of the Spanish kingdom came to be concentrated in the New World. Although larger and richer than its eastern neighbor, Spain had been segmented into a number of small kingdoms and divided between Christians and Muslims. Not until 1492, when the crowns of Aragon and Castile were united and the Muslims expelled, could the Spanish concentrate on their resources. By then, they were far behind, with Portugal dominating the African route. Queen Isabella, and her husband Ferdinand were persuaded to take an interest in the western route by a Genoese adventurer. His name was Christopher Columbus. It proved to result in one of the greatest accidents of history. Like all well-informed people of his day, Columbus believed the world to be round. He concluded that a western track would be shorter and less expensive than the path that the Portuguese were breaking around Africa. He was incredibly off. He misjudged the size of the globe by 25% and the distance by 400. Regardless, he sailed westward into the unknown, and in 1492, On October 12th, he landed in the Bahamas. Initially, the discovery was a disappointment. He had gone in search of a western passage and he had failed to return with eastern spices. It was soon apparent in subsequent voyages that he had found an altogether unknown landmass. Still, he continued to focus on discovering a route to the Indies. This was all the more imperative once da Gama found that passage around Africa. Rivalry between the two nations intensified after 1500 when the Portuguese began exploring the coastline of Brazil. In 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas had confined Portugal's right to the eastern route, as well as any undiscovered lands east of an imaginary line fixed west of the Cape Verde Islands. This entitled Portugal to Brazil. The Spanish received whatever lay west. Exploration. Subsequent explorers began to explore the vast coastline of Central and South America. In 1513, Vasco Núñez Balboa crossed the land passage in Panama and became the first European to view the Pacific Ocean. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan's voyage remains the most outstanding of the age. Vowing to reach the East Indies by sailing west after making the Atlantic crossing, he resupplied his fleet in Brazil. Then his ships began along southerly toward the south tip of South America. Although he had no idea of the length of the continent, mutinies, shipwrecks, desertions were at every turn. When he finally found the straits that still bear his name, it took 38 days to navigate 300 miles. The Pacific voyage was equally remarkable. The sailors went nearly 4 months without taking on fresh water or food. Survival was miraculous as the sailors drank yellow water and ate rats. When Magellan finally reached solid land, it cost him his life when he involved himself in a local war in Cebu, Philippines. His navigator actually completed the journey in 1522, 3 years and 1 month after setting sail. He returned with a single ship of 18 survivors of the crew of 280, but a hull packed with precious spice. However, in 1529, the Spanish crown relinquished to the Portuguese its claims to the Spice Islands for a cash settlement. By then, trading spices was less alluring than mining gold and silver, as the Spanish concentrated on the Americas.